Hello, Bridgewater College Education 370 students. In this screencast, we're going to learn how to set up a gradebook for a teacher who chooses to grade on a percentage basis. For example, in the class that we have here, this teacher has quizzes, tests, homework, and participation, and every grade is based on a 100-point system. That is, every grade is 0 through 100. Now, what we want to do is to now assign the correct percentages to these based on the teacher's grading policy. This teacher's grading policy is that she's going to count the quizzes worth 20%. She's going to count the test worth 60%. She's going to count the homework at 10% and the class participation at 10%. And of course that should make 100% for the grades. So let's see how to do this. The first thing we want to do is to add a column for quiz average. That average is going to go here after quiz 5. So I'm going to click actually on column G, which is test 1, and I'm going to right click and say insert. And when I do, it created a column for me to put quiz average here. So I'm going to put quiz AVG. Likewise, I need to have a column for test average, and the way to do that is to go beyond your last test over here to column J, right click, insert, and now I can put test AVG. I'll do the same for homework. So I'll right click on I'll click on column M, right click, and say insert, and this will be the homework average. I don't need to do that for participation because I'm assuming that there's only one participation grade, but if I had multiple participation grades, I could certainly do that as well here. The next thing I notice is that my gradebook doesn't look very neat. I've got names chopped off, I've got some things right justified, some things left justified, so let me take a minute and make things look a little bit neater. To do that, I'm going to boldface row 1. Anytime you want something to apply to the whole row, you know to click on the number to the left, 1 in this case, and then I'll click boldface. Next, I want to center all the grades. So how about if I highlight column B, C, D all the way through? Actually, I'm going to highlight all the way through O because I am going to have a final grade here in a little bit in column O. So I'll highlight all of those and click on the center icon, and now that centers everything. So things are starting to look better. Column A isn't wide enough. I can't see all the students' names. So put your cursor between the A and B and drag to the right, and now we can see all their names. So now it looks a little bit nicer, and we're ready to begin calculating some grades. What we're going to do is we're going to calculate the first student's average, and then we're going to copy that formula for the remaining students. Oops, before I do that, I noticed that my names aren't alphabetized. So let's do that. And here's a handy trick for alphabetizing grades. I'm going to click on the first row on number 1, and I'm going to go up to the column that says data and then filter. What that does is it produces little arrows for each column now that will enable me to sort. So if I now come to the name column and select A to Z, it alphabetizes my students and of course also keeps the correct grades with the correct students. This is handy when I want to see maybe the grades sorted from high to low on a particular test. I'll come over here to the first test. I'll click on the arrow key and I'll say sort these from largest to smallest, and now it sorts them from the highest grade to the lowest grade. I'll go back and alphabetize now, back to column A, and I'll sort them from A to Z. And now we're set and ready to enter our averages. We'll calculate Betsy's quiz average first. So I'll click here, which is where her quiz average would go, and I'm going to use an Excel formula. I'm going to type equal, and then I start typing average, and as soon as I do, it pops up a drop down. I'm going to say average. So I double click that. I have to tell it what I want average, so I'll just highlight the quizzes. So I'm highlighting from B through F. Those are the quizzes. All I have to do is to put a closing parenthesis and hit the enter key, and it has done so. It has averaged her quizzes. I'm going to now copy this for the other 4 students. The way to do that is to put your cursor in the lower right hand corner. It switches to a plus sign, and then I'll pull down, and indeed it computes their average as well. When I do this, I notice that the format of these is such that some folks don't have a decimal point, some do, and maybe I'd like for this to all look the same. So what I'll do now is click on the G, right click, format cells, number, and I want there to be only 1 decimal place, let's say, for everybody. And indeed, now they all have exactly 1 decimal place. I like that format for the quiz average. Let's go over to test average, and we'll do the same thing. Again, I'm going to fix Betsy's test average and copy it for the other 4 students. So I type equal, average. I can just type the whole word average if I want to. Left parentheses. Highlight all the tests, which in my case are just the ones here. Close parenthesis. And now Betsy's average is shown here. I'll grab the right hand side and pull down, and it does the averaging now for all of the students. Here's another trick you can use for formatting. If you've already fixed one cell the way you want other cells to be, you can go to the cell that's formatted the way you want it to, go to your home screen, and on the home screen there's a little paintbrush here called Format Painter. If you double click that Format Painter and then drag, it will highlight, it will format all of the numbers that you have selected based on the first one that you use as the model. When you're done, just simply click on the Format Painter again, and we're ready to move on. Let's do homework average the same way. So again, I'm going to set Betsy's equal, and I could start typing the word average, or I could just double click here. I need to say columns K and L are what I want you to average. Close parenthesis. And now it's got Betsy's average calculated correctly. I'll drag down. Once again, if I want to fix the formatting here, there's 2 ways to do it. One is simply to do what I did before. Right click, format cells, number, 1 decimal place. Or I could use that trick of copying the format from one cell to others. Well, now I have the individual averages set up properly. Now we have to do the overall average. So I'm just going to put final as my column heading here, because this will be the overall average for the grading period for the student. So here's where we have to include the fact that these are weighted differently. I'm going to type equal. Now, remember that we said her quizzes are going to count 20%. So I'm going to go to quiz average, and I'm going to multiply that, that's the asterisk, times 0.2. Plus, I'm going to go to the test average, which is right here, and that's going to be times 0.6 because she's weighting this 60%. Plus the homework average, and homework, as you recall, was going to be worth 10%, 0.1. And then finally the participation grade, which is going to be column N2 times 0.1. At this point, I think I've got it all set up right. Looks like Betsy's got a 97 average, and that average is based on counting her quiz average at 20%, her test average at 60%, her homework average at 10%, and her class participation grade at 10% also. I've got her formula fixed correctly, so now let's copy that for the other 4 students. I get the decimal points that I'm not particularly happy with, so let's use that trick again of going to a cell that's formatted correctly. Double click on the paintbrush, highlight, and then click on the paintbrush again, and now I have the grades successfully averaged. You might notice here that Henry is missing a homework grade, and the question is, has it counted that as a 0, or has it simply skipped it? Well, if you look at his homework average, you'll see that it simply skipped it. It didn't count it as a 0. If your policy is to have missing homework count as zeros, then you would need to type in a 0 here for Henry. I'll do that now so that his quiz average then correctly reflects the missing grade. But the Excel doesn't know that that's your policy, so you have to make sure that the Excel formulas you set up match the grading policy for your class. Okay, I think we're done. I think our class looks good now. One more thing we're going to do in the next screencast is to learn how to have Excel look at these grades and decide which is an A, which is a B, and so forth, and actually put that grade over here in the next column. See you then.